Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are looking at a modernized Makarov. This is the PMM, or, well, modernized pistol Makarov now, that was developed in the late 80s, adopted in 1990 at the very tail end of the Soviet Union. So if you are in 1990 and you're looking at the Makarov and you're thinking, how do we elevate this a little bit and kind of do something to keep it vaguely relevant to the modern era, what can we do? Well, in the meantime, of course, you're also developing modern 9mm parabellum locked breech pistols. But there are two things that were done with the Makarov. One is to increase the magazine capacity from 8 up to 12. Not a bad increase. They did that by actually going to a double stack magazine design. It's kind of a weird design, intended to be as minimally disruptive to the overall mechanics of the pistol as possible. We'll take a close look at it in a moment. The other thing they did was just crank up the power of the cartridge. Like, everyone's embarrassed if they don't have 9mm parabellum for their service cartridge, so let's take 9x18, leave it dimensionally identical, put more powder in it, crank the velocity up literally 30%. So it went from a roughly 1,040 foot per second cartridge up to 1,360 feet per second. That's, I think, 325 up to 415 meters per second, a 30% increase in velocity, which is huge, which makes it essentially comparable to 9mm parabellum. Well, how do you do that with a simple blowback pistol without just, giving it a lifespan of 100 rounds and then it falls apart? Well, the answer is they cut helical grooves into the chamber to delay extraction of the cartridge. These grooves would create additional friction as the cartridge was being extracted, as it was blowing back, so to speak, and delay opening enough to keep the gun reasonably safe. So that part they didn't end up adopting, and we'll talk about why when we take a closer look at this guy. Importation of Russian handguns into the United States ended in 1996. There was just a window of a few years where guns were able to be commercially imported, and that's what we have here. This isn't a military PMM. This is an IJ70-17AH imported by Baikal, which was the Russian firearms export brand. It is essentially a PMM. In this case, the 17 designates that this is in 9x17mm, which is 380 ACP. These were also made in 9 Makarov. Those are the IJ70-18s. A is for adjustable sight, which they put on these as commercial import guns. The standard military PMMs have the regular fixed rear sight, like this guy. And the H means that it is a high-capacity magazine, so this has the double-stack magazine. Now, we've got Russian commercial proofs here. On the other side, this is marked caliber 380 ACP, and this was actually imported by a company called B West out of Tucson, Arizona. The manufacture quality of these pistols is not up to the same standard as the Soviet-era ones with the advent of the new Russian Federation. All right, so let's look at the magazine here. It's still a heel release, but it is double stack, sort of with a single stack tower on it. And the whole purpose of this was to increase magazine capacity without having to redesign the geometry of the feed system. So by giving it essentially the same top end as a regular Makarov magazine, all of your features like the magazine, the bolt, the slide hold open, the feed ramps, all of that stuff stays exactly the same, but you can get some extra cartridges in the base. And so where the original had a capacity of 8, the PMM has a capacity of 12. Note that some of the US imported pistols were limited to 10 rounds. You'll find 10 and 12 round magazines for these. This is a 12 rounder, which is nice. Let's actually pull this apart. Let me show you how they do it internally. Just push down that button and I can pull the floor plate forward. We've got an internal retainer, and then this is a very fragile feeling plastic, but there are actually 2 magazine springs. So this spring here, this top follower, is for the top feed, the tower section of the stack. And if I just take the spring out, essentially what's going to happen is once you've got the top bit compressed, the follower is going to drop into the bottom, like the secondary follower here, which fills out the double stack side or section of the magazine. So this essentially gives you a double stack style of follower that can hold 2 cartridges staggered. And then once this stops, as it's rising through the magazine, it'll come to this point and stop. And then your single stack follower takes over and pushes the last couple of cartridges up. Note that we have this spring guide. In the 10-round magazines, this plug is actually about twice as long, and it just artificially stops the follower before it goes all the way down and limits your capacity to 10. Also, by the way, these magazines are interchangeable between 380 and 9 Makarov, so there's no difference between the magazines for those commercial versions. One of the interesting side effects, and I don't know if this was intentional or just a happy accident, but because of that feed tower design, you can actually use single stack magazines in the double stack Makarovs without any problem. So they will lock in place there, and this magazine will wobble side to side, but the top end is the same as the double stack version. And so even though it wobbles side to side a bit, it still feeds and functions just fine. So I don't know that this is, I mean, this is kind of cool for the collector market because it's a little hard to find these magazines. So if you want to go out and actually shoot one of these, it's nice to be able to use the easily accessible standard 8-round magazines in there. All right, while we're here, let's open this up real quick. We pull the trigger guard down and then just pull the slide off the top. The PMMs, actually the Makarovs that are made in the Russian Federation post-Soviet collapse are, the manufacturing standards and quality are dropped a bit from the Soviet era. They actually used a cast frame for the PMMs here. You can see there's a little open slot there where you can see the spring for the trigger guard. And there's some interesting other features here, like this checkering on the front strap of the frame, which is actually cast in place. That's not machined. There's your larger double stack magazine well. The grips are, of course, different from the standard original Makarov grips because the whole thing's wider. The attachment screw is the same, but the grips themselves are substantially wider. But I'll tell you what, this is actually to me, a very comfortable pistol to hold in the hand. The wider grips really aren't a problem. They make it pretty comfortable. If anything, they might reduce the felt recoil a bit just by giving you more surface area back here for the gun to push into your hand with. All right, I mentioned the helical grooves in the chamber. This pistol doesn't have them. In fact, the military decided not to fully adopt that increased power cartridge, largely because it was dimensionally identical to regular standard 9mm Makarov. And so it was inevitably going to cause problems when people mixed it up. There was no way to prevent it from being chambered into regular Makarovs that didn't have the chamber grooves, and it would have significant problems, short-term durability problems on a Makarov, a standard Makarov. So that cartridge ends up not going into major service, but it was developed, it was an idea for how to increase the potency of the Makarov pistol, the PMM. Ultimately, of course, the Russian Federation would adopt a 9mm Parabellum pistol. That's the MP443 that I believe went into service in 2003. Now, of course, Makarovs are still around a lot, especially presumably today with the war in Ukraine using up military material in Russia. Anyway, let's take this guy out to the range and let's take it to a bug match and see how I can compete with, in this case, a 380, but a PMM Modernized Makarov.
Ready? Stand by. Sorry. I got so excited to fulfill the Russian service pistol's true job of shooting a guy in the back of the head that I completely forgot about that one target. Yes. Well, I've got... Stand by. That was fast, but not super accurate. We'll see how it did. So I'm down one there. This guy, my first shot went way off somewhere. Down one. So I only had the one there.
Down 4.
Down 6 points. Not great, not terrible.
Stand by.
Well, crud. I hit the popper and it didn't go down, so I'm down 4 points there.
Stand by. When you are done.
All right, let's see if that tactic worked, and I actually got some hits. All right, so 4 gut shots, but that works. Nope, shooting low. So that's down 3, that's down 3, that's down 1, and that's down 1.
Not a terrible match. Not perfect, not great, but I did pretty decently well. I feel like there are some places where the gun let me down a little bit. This is a pistol that really was designed actually to be more of a backup gun or an officer's pistol than a true fighting combat handgun. It's intended to be small, light, easy to carry, relatively cheap to manufacture. And so some of those characteristics came through. The small sights, the short sight radius, the not great, very safe, but not super light double action trigger on the first round, and it's not the world's best single action trigger. Had me in particular shooting a bit low on some of the stages, which cost me some points. Overall, though, I will say the 10-round magazine, and I shot the match with a 10-round mag, by the way, not a 12, which I probably should have dug out, but the 10 rounds really did make a difference over 8. Now, of course, this is just a competition stage, set of stages, but that applies to real life too. Having 50% more capacity, having 12 rounds instead of 8, is definitely the sort of thing that could make a difference for a Soviet soldier or officer carrying a Makarov. So, overall, I certainly had a good time. It was a lot of fun. There aren't a lot of these PMM, commercial PMMs in the country because there was only a window of a couple years where they were imported. But they are here. They are available in both 9x17, which is 380, and 9x18 Makarov. Be aware of the difference between the two. The magazines are the same. Baikal at the same time was also importing what they called the IJ70s, but with the single stack 8-round magazines. So if you're looking for one of these and you want the double stack, make sure you look for the H suffix on the model name, and well, the grips and the magazine are pretty distinctive. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.